All right, good evening and welcome to the March 19th, 2026 Santa Cruz Planning Commission meeting. I will now call this meeting to order. Tess, can I please have a roll call?
Commissioner Gordon. Hammer. Here. Kennedy.
Here.
McKelvey.
Here.
Wilhamus.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Chair Kelly.
Here. All right, Commissioner Gordon is absent. Are there any statements of disqualification for tonight's item? All right, hearing none. We'll go ahead and move to oral communications. This is the time for members of the public to address the commission on items not on today's agenda and are within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Is there anyone who would like to come up? Please come on up. Go ahead and please state your name and what you would like to address.
My name is Robert Steffen. I believe this is within the jurisdiction of your council. I'm concerned about the ride at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk called the Typhoon. It's been here for a number of years, but it's very, very loud. And really it has a loud, whiny, siren type note, if you would. It lasts for quite a while and it fills the neighborhoods. And I believe when it was installed, it was supposed to be within the sound levels of the other rides at the park, but it's not. It's way outside the bounds of the other rides. And so I think it needs to be modified or replaced.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. Oh, only one more I would add. The only other ride that's even close is the double shot. And there are, apparently, it's possible to put better mufflers on it. Do that.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no other speakers for oral communication, I'm going to go ahead and close oral communications. We're now going to move to the approval of the minutes from the February 5th, 2026 Planning Commission meeting. Is there a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
All right, now that there's a motion on the floor, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Wonderful.
Thank you, Tess, for keeping track of that. It was quite an epic minutes.
All right, thank you. The motion passes unanimously. All right, and now we'll move on to tonight's agenda, transportation proximate development. Can we go ahead and have our staff report?
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. I'm Claire Glogly. I'm the Principal Transportation Planner for the city, joined by Matt Starkey, who is the Transportation Manager. And this evening, we are here to talk to you about potential policy options to address concerns that we've heard that were raised at Council related to transit proximate developments and parking impacts as a result of those. Notably this evening, there's a series of questions in your staff report. We're going to pose various policy options. We do not need a motion tonight. Hopefully what we get is robust discussion, identification of issues that you've seen in your role here at the dais and in the community, conversations that you've had, and desired approaches that you would like us to consider to address those at a policy level. So we're looking forward to a robust discussion here. What we'll start with, here's an agenda for this evening. We'll cover why we're here, and then go through some of those policy levers that we think could be potential tools to address what we've heard. So last August, City Council directed the transportation team to explore this issue, and they listed a number of policy issues that they wanted us to consider as we did this. Really, this came about because in Santa Cruz, as you've probably noticed in your role, we have more development pressure than we've had in a while. And we have growth and change that's happening in a different way as a result of a bunch of housing law at the state level that has made it so that more dense and more intense development than we've seen in quite a while is coming into the city. Both projects that get entitled and not built, and those get entitled and then become built. At Commission and at Council, these conversations with the community are challenging in a lot of ways. And we have this push-pull between the recognition that we need a variety of different housing types in our community, but that accommodating growth and change is really challenging and leads to feelings in our neighborhoods that are different than maybe they've been for a very long time. We hear that in a lot of ways in the realm of transportation and parking, concerns about neighborhood cut-through traffic, spillover parking impacts, streets that previously didn't have, a lot of neighbors now have more neighbors, and that feels different. And many of the tools that maybe we'd used in the past, we don't have the option to use anymore due to state legislative changes. In particular, those relating to reduced or no parking requirements with many different types of development, and then big feelings of concern that as we're still in a time where many people have cars, often more than one per household, those cars will go somewhere. And where does that somewhere be? And that's the big question that we see from neighborhoods. So we have some policy levers that we can use at the local level that fall within the confines of what we can do. And we'll go through those this evening with an explanation of what they are, what we currently do, what some potential options are, and then pose some questions. What I would request we do is at each section where we hit questions, I would love to be able to pause and discuss while we're currently on that, if that's amenable. Otherwise, we can hold them to the end.
Does anyone want to be able to ask questions as we go, or prefer wait till the end?
I think as we go is good.
Okay, yeah.
Chunky ones that are gonna take some thought.
I agree, yeah. All right, we'll do it as we go.
Thank you. So the first one that we are going to discuss is impact fees. So you're probably familiar, I usually put information in for the benefit of folks in the audience. But these are one-time charges that we put out from local government on new development so that they can fund their fair share of the needs of new infrastructure to support that development. Things like roadways, bikeways, sidewalks, parks, schools, all of those things. They ensure that new development comes in and they are paying their fair share. For us, the one that we look at mostly is our traffic impact fee in transportation. My slides are text heavy. Currently what we have is a traffic impact fee and a transportation study. How this comes to you right now is that we have our traffic impact fee, which is set by resolution and by ordinance, and we update it annually based upon the construction price index. And then we have our transportation study, our TS. And it is laid out directly how those things will be done. For a transportation study, those are generally done when the project is going to generate 50 or more trips during the PM peak hour. We also consider critical intersections. So we say if there's going to be 25 new trips in the morning or afternoon peak. And generally, the way that our transportation study is focused is on moving cars. What will the result on the roadway network for cars look like as part of this new development? Unsurprisingly, what you often hear is people want more information about what it's going to feel like in their neighborhood. And our transportation study right now doesn't do maybe the best job of considering what it will feel like for people who are not in cars, people who are biking, people who are walking, people who are taking transit. And by and large, when we're doing these, they are for developments that are providing minimal parking or no parking as a result of changes in state law. So we have this push-pull dichotomy between creating new buildings and new places for people to live that don't have as much parking as before, because we're saying these are places that are going to be walkable, bikeable, and transit accessible, yet the way that we're considering these isn't always taking into the needs of those modes. Hand in hand, we have our traffic impact study, our impact fee here, that comes from our general plan 2030. And when we were doing that general plan, the CEQA environment that we were within was a level of service environment. What that meant is that we considered what the growth build out would be for the number of vehicles that would be on the road and projected how much delay that would cause at intersections for those vehicles. When those intersections fell below our acceptable level of service, LOS, our mitigation was to do things that would make those intersections, those roadways, be able to accommodate more capacity. So our transportation impact fee is generally auto-focused. 80% of that fee goes towards auto-oriented needs. 15% goes to bike and pedestrian needs, and 5% goes to neighborhood needs. Currently, the fee is just over $5,000 per PM trip. Most of what you hear, most of what I've heard when I'm at commission and council, concerns from neighbors, is not generally about the needs of cars moving through, but it's a lot about what my neighborhood is going to feel like. If I live adjacent to this project, if I live proximate to this project, there's going to be new cars in my neighborhood. There's going to be new cars on my street. What can you do for my neighborhood street, not generally the big intersection that's down the road or a couple blocks away? And we don't have as many tools in place to be able to be responsive to neighborhoods. To say, yes, you're asking for traffic calming in your neighborhood, or you're asking for something else that would make you feel better about welcoming new neighbors to your neighborhood. So potential changes we have with impact fees, as is noted in the staff report, we've applied for a grant to the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Program that would fund a total revision of our existing fee-based program and the way that we analyze transportation. This would be a new multimodal impact fee. The way you do that is you have a set of projects in a project list that you have determined would address community needs and community values. You cost those out, you get a new fee, and then the money that's generated from that fee goes towards implementing that more multimodal set of projects that would potentially better implement the community values that we so often hear expressed at Commission and Council. And under the transportation study, what it would do is have better evaluation of multimodal impacts, ones that are quantitative and objective rather than qualitative, so that they'd actually be usable to you. One of the things we've heard over and over again is getting those better objective standards in so that there are specific things that can be pointed to and that can then be required that are less squishy. So at the first policy section, the big question here is, are there key concerns or elements that should be included for evaluation in developing a new fee-based program? From this also, did how I represent it adequately reflect the experience that you have? Are there things that are missing, other concerns that are frequently brought up that maybe we haven't discussed yet? And I'll pause there. This one? Okay.
So there's no current study for multimodal transportation, is that correct?
It's very qualitative in the way that we assess in our transportation study. You're asked to give like a narrative description essentially, but we don't have any thresholds or standards that we would measure it against. Very different than for cars where we say 50 trips means you do this, 25 trips means you do this. It's broad.
Okay, so I think my opinion on this would be if to do further studies on multimodal transportation. So if, say, you have a new complex that goes in and it's got 50 new units, they might increase like 5 vehicle trips per day, which may seem like a lot to the community, but then say the majority are using other forms of transportation. To me, I would feel that would need to weigh heavily before moving on to any further traffic impact fees on further developments, because it sounds like at that point, if they're doing their due diligence, especially a generation that's coming in and using less cars, that we shouldn't necessarily hinder further development with further impact fees if we're moving in the right direction.
Can I ask good evening, Matt Starkey, Transportation Manager. I think an interesting part of what you described is in the traffic study methodology, a lot of times we adjust for mode share. So how many people are driving, biking, walking, taking transit. The current traffic study setup doesn't really consider that.
Right.
So I think that would be a really good change. On the flip side, I would ask though, if we are encouraging people to bike and walk and take transit to a site, are we providing facilities that are appropriate for that? And that's what we see is missing in our study methodology right now, is it's just focused on the cars. But to your point, if people are, a lot of these developments are incentivized to not have people driving to them. So does the infrastructure match that? And that's where we have a bit of that discrepancy in the policy at the moment. So I think it could still require some type of fee, but that fee would then just go to building a bus stop or a bike lane or that sort of thing.
Or to match a larger grant that would build out part of the network that would facilitate getting towards a fully connected network.
It also is, I think, important to know that when you say 5 units, 5 car trips, it's not like that. It is multiple car trips per unit. And depending on the number of cars, et cetera, I personally worked on a child care center that had 60 clients. There were 4 trips per day, meaning pick up and drop off, drop off and pick up. And I think the fee was quoted as like $1.2 million for that center, which completely scuttled the project. And I think that my bias is toward, I love the multimodal idea. I think that we should be trying to take advantage of every mode of transportation that we can. But I would especially love to see any revenue going, being generated from these proposals, whatever they are, going to public transportation. Because the transit system has for years been operating deficit after deficit after deficit. I know that I'm in support of that, even just because I recognize that public transport doesn't necessarily pay for itself. It's something that is subsidized. But I believe that really giving people alternatives to being in a car or whatever mode they choose and the impacts that are derived from that is they're most effectively blunted by actually getting people out of them. So that's just a general comment that I would make.
I'm so excited. I've been waiting for this my entire career. We're about to start breaking down a really bad system, right? So with that in start, I have a couple questions. It's up there. One of the things that I think frustrates the public with the traffic impact fee is that nexus thing, where it has to be. Can you just describe how that works now and how it doesn't work for me?
Yes, and I know there's an attorney here who knows a lot more about this than I do. The nexus study, so you have to have a connection between the fee that you're charging and what you're funding it with. Right now, our traffic impact study has a list of projects that were generated from the general plan EIR, and then a list of things that would mitigate the concerns in there, the bad level of service or the lessened level of service, and a cost associated with implementing each of those. And then that was divided up based upon our growth projections to get to this fee, this $5,000+ plus. In order to create a new fee that was defensible, we would have to establish a new project list that would achieve an objective that we had. That objective could be many other things we have in the general plan related to reducing single occupant vehicle dependency, creating opportunities for people to walk and bike. It could rely on our climate action plan that has a aggressive goal of 30, I'm gonna get the percent wrong, plus % of people who are using active modes for their trips. So we'd have to connect the project list and the cost of those projects in the list to the policy goal that we have that's stated and adopted, and then get a per trip or a per unit cost of those trips. So there's a process that you go through, that it's not pulled from thin air, and that the projects you have and the fee you collect are linked together. So we're achieving the thing we want to achieve.
So in theory, it could just go 100% toward the bus, towards bikes, toward enchiladas, whatever. Bad example, but it could be dedicated. Because, 20 years ago, everyone would have told me that's insane and we'll get sued and you can't do that. And so that's refreshing to create that framework and start working on that. Because it makes sense with Mission Street, right, where it's all going to clog up. And they're all at D or C, they're all really bad level of service already. But when we look at more matrixed, connected, other ways of getting around town, it just is silly to have it just be right next to that one project, in my opinion. So let me talk about money. What if we said, we hate the TIF, let's get rid of it? That's a hole in the city's budget, but how much money are we talking about? I'm sure it varies by year, by the economy, by projects coming through, but is this real money? You said it could be seed money. I acknowledge that, but.
It varies by year and maybe some of our recent projects that come in.
Yeah, it's real money. For example, the project on Front Street that's tied to the metro development, we're paying $1.5 million from the traffic impact fee to improve the traffic signals on Front Street that ultimately support that whole mixed-use development and transit center. So it is real, definitely real money. Some of the larger developments you guys see here probably bring in anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 a piece, and we've had quite a few of those recently. So it is an important funding source for us that is nicely attributed right to the intersections, and it keeps us focused on improvements there. So it would be hard to replace that funding source. So I would be cautious about trying to remove it completely, but thinking more about how we retool it to fit our needs is important. Because I do agree with your point about getting the balance right with still wanting to encourage the housing production. Yeah. That's a goal.
So interesting. So my last observation kind of question is like, it seems like if you're taking, like, remind me on the downtown library project, when you're taking like a parking lot and adding housing, right? You're kind of not ever adding trips. Is that just a generalization I've made, or we typically plan for an overbuild parking for, I don't know, or we have in the past, but is that shifting? Does that make sense? I'm kind of rambling now.
We do calculate on net new trips. So
That's what I'm
say that you
thinking of.
have a restaurant and it gets replaced with a office.
Yeah.
You would likely have a reduction. I'm going that way first.
Yeah.
Give me the look. But if you went the other way and you had an office that then wanted to become a restaurant and figure out grease traps and hoods and everything else, they would have an increase in trips. We use ITE, trip generation, for that, and they would pay a fee on top of that. It's one of the interesting things about it that this fee can also drive the types of development that we see in certain places.
A piece of feedback we've heard on that topic from the smaller projects that are trying to change, like a community center to a pizza place, for example. When you add $50,000 to a project like that, it gets, more challenging to do. And so I think that's one thing we've heard from the business community thus far, is that finding that right threshold for when you have to contribute to it and then making it really predictable. And I think one of the challenges is, since it's always based on your existing, what's there today, that can kind of vary based on what was there when we did the original study. So I think that's something that we could really simplify in the process to make it easier for those smaller developments too.
I'm not going to go on all night with examples, but I think of like on the west side, Verve Coffee, and those, like, there's a couple legal offices and artists in there. And it was many years ago, but I remember when that was up here, and it was a gym, and like the neighborhood was in uproar about the parking. And then COVID comes and they take out those 8 spots. And it's great, everyone loves it. So I felt like that was a particular failure of this, like, well, we have this old zoning model, but then all these cool little mixed uses are moving in. And obviously the people are coming in at different times, and the coffee surge is different than the daycare surge. Yeah, just thinking about that. And the end result is the parking spots are so small. You can't park.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize the time, but just if you could, as you're going through these elements, I read through a lot of them, and there were a couple of mentions of the kind of the threshold for the size of the project that things apply to. If you could kind of, if there is thinking along those lines for each of these, it would be really helpful to know.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things that I've considered, so since I mentioned we used to be under a level of service in CEQA, and now we use vehicle miles traveled. And VMT has a small project screening criteria where if the project generates under a certain number of trips, it's 50 trips, then, or 110 trips per day. That's what it is, 110 trips per day. Then it screens through and there's no additional analysis required, regardless of what the use is. I think that might be appropriate here, especially for some of our smaller projects that we have, that there likely will be a change that's felt, but it won't be an impact. I think Matt's example of the community center becoming a pizza place in an existing little shopping center is something that was probably more of a community benefit, but was something that did have a cost there. So thinking about some floor there where we screen through smaller projects in order to not have additional cost on those projects and allow those buildings in our community to have tenants. have neighborhood business. So maybe the same as what we consider for VMT analysis.
Does Ed want to make any comment?
I haven't been actually involved in the doing the numbers on parking requirements for residential in a while. But I would appreciate some kind of clarification about the parking requirement based on the kind of unit and size of unit, that is to say, number of bedrooms and square footage, because it strikes me that the impact on parking isn't at all linear. That is to say, some household types can get by without parking at all, whereas other housing types may have multiple cars associated with that household. How do you manage the calculations of parking demand based on the kind of housing that's being provided?
I think the question about managing parking demand versus parking requirements is a really interesting one. For parking demand, it varies a lot, exactly as you said, for the type of user. You could have a building, a project development that is, say, 100 units that's geared towards seniors or aging in place, that you're likely going to have a much different parking demand than you would have if it was geared towards college kids or young adults and young professionals. It could be the exact same building. So the demand is something that's fairly challenging. We do have calculations that we can use for that. I think that really where we come into it here is regardless of the demand, most of the projects that we see coming in, we can't require supply. And that's where it becomes the real challenge, that the demand is likely still there. The demand is likely not zero. And what do you do with that demand, and how do you manage that demand when it's not managed on site? Did that help?
Yeah, it gets me thinking at least.
Thank you. I like the comments and I like the conversation. It's gotten me thinking a little bit too. So when I looked at this, and just to piggyback on the demand issue, we can't require parking at all. Really, we have no control over parking whatsoever. What we do control is fees and using pricing of parking to control, to the extent that we can under state law, how parking is managed and regulated. And so for me, this, it made a lot of sense to start looking at arterial streets and potentially creating overlay zones where fees could be charged when buildings of a certain size get built within a certain distance of an arterial street. And we can use that money to create more multimodal infrastructure, I guess we could say. So the thing that really kind of bothered me about the transportation impact fees is the 80% auto and 15% bike and 5% neighborhood. I'd like to maybe change that ratio a little bit so that we're focused a little bit more on how people get around without cars rather than sort of bolstering and making it easier for people to keep driving and keep parking. And I think also, I mean, I have a lot of things to say about all this just because all of the items we're going to look at tonight are just so spread, I mean, loosely related, but pretty spread out, right? And how they tie into each other, I think, could be really interesting with a more comprehensive approach to all of these issues at once. That said, I think there's also a really good opportunity to look at the active transportation plan and some of the projects that are coming up there. And I mean, this sort of ties into some of the other things we're looking at, but to potentially get the fees from certain neighborhoods and use those to improve those neighborhoods. I looked it up on ChatGPT. They called it a parking benefit district. So something like that could be cool. So for example, if we're talking downtown expansion plan, you know, there's a parking benefits district and fees get collected for all the building that gets done there, and then we can improve that area, which I think there's a lot of concern about in terms of what development is going to do and how it's going to affect that particular part of town. So just some thoughts. I have more, but I also don't want to monopolize because I like listening.
We could also go through and come back, because I think that's probably why.
It's all gonna layer.
That's why Claire and I love transportation, is it is all connected together here. And we do have robust discussion at the end about our neighborhood parking permit program and how that sort of ties into the arterials and neighbors that get impacted by those larger developments. So I think there's definitely a lot more there too.
Yeah, I like the focus on Soquel and the downtown expansion plan, because I really wish we could do something about Mission. I don't know, that gets trickier. So.
Something I would add, I had a chance to talk to Commissioner Paul Hamas earlier today about some of these ideas. And this idea of overlay zones or something to that end. Another way that could be done is establishing projects on those corridors that we desire to improve in a given way to a multimodal framework, complete streets framework. Those could be the projects that go into a revised multimodal fee. And then that becomes, it tiers down. We've identified where those are, what they are. We've costed them out. As development occurs, we've identified those areas that we are then going to retrofit to the transportation that we see now and into the future. So that's one potential way to achieve that, linking to that idea that you had.
I just want to point out, I guess if I could change one thing, it would be parsing out bike and pedestrian funding, because bikes are usually for young able-bodied people. Pedestrians include folks in wheelchairs, they include the elderly, they include children, and so they really serve two distinct populations in a way. So I think, yeah, to the extent that we can break them apart and like honor the pedestrian side of things, even though like bikes are like the sexy thing right now, I think that would be really important.
We're all pedestrians.
When we say active transportation, that covers all that, right?
Yeah.
Actually, could I ask one follow-up question, Commissioner McKelvey? You mentioned funding public transportation. Was your intent behind that, like fees or money going right to Santa Cruz Metro to provide better bus service or something like that?
Yes, I remember once upon a time, 40 years ago, I lived out in Live Oak and commuted up to UCSC, and it was easy. And now, you know, I remember sometime in the, I think it might have been the 90s or the late 80s, they brought in a consultant to study the bus system, and they kind of broke it down. They said, okay, everyone on this side of town, if they want to go to this side of town, they've got to come to one end of the system and then be shot across to the other end of the system, and then it became much less service frequency, and frankly, you know, the transfers went away. It became much more kind of simplified and kind of oversimplified in the interest of cutting costs and everything. But it made it so that like seniors that were trying to get to, you know, kind of that medical area or by Frederick Street, they would have to take a crazy number of trips or distance of trips in order to get there. And I would just like to see some more granular planning for the buses, you know, if it's ride sharing, if it's particular, you know, what do they call it for seniors going to?
Right, transit?
Yes, yeah. I'd love to see more of that rather than, and obviously I'm all in favor of facilities being funded for bikes and pedestrians and everything else, but I think that in order to genuinely get people out of their cars, you have to give them ways to get around.
Okay, yeah, I'm taking that notes on that as more like, and it could be giving Metro funding to increase service in a way that's more attractive. It could,
Yes.
there could also be an infrastructure component to that where you put in dedicated bus lanes, you don't have to wait in SoCal to go get to work or
Possibly
something.
that
So
too,
those sort of
although
ideas.
that, one of the things that I'm struggling with some of this is that, saying that you're going to have an overlay, for example, Commissioner Polhemus, you're putting fees on projects that are actually benefiting single-family neighborhoods, for example. And I think that burden and impact really has to be shared if we're saying that as a community, we're going to encourage people to do this. And it's difficult to, we try to make these rules. This is what I always say, making these rules and making them effective is just super hard. And I think we often stop just short of really gaming it out and figuring out how to shape the rules. And you end up, all the outliers are just burnt to the ground. And I think that with the kinds of numbers we're talking about and the complexity, I read that the permit parking, I know we're gonna talk about that later, but it doesn't pay for itself. All those things, we need evidence that these things actually work. So that's a Cliff's Notes version.
And just to add on, I just want to make sure that when we're doing traffic impact fees, that we're also not unintentionally constraining housing production as well. So, because at the end of the day, the housing is the commodity that we're hoping to have a community benefit.
Yes.
Such balance.
It is, yeah.
All these items. It's a really good point, Commissioner McKelvey.
All right, are we ready for the objective?
Objective standards. You all know what this is. But yeah, standards involve no personal subjective judgment, certainty for development. For us, these are in our municipal code. So currently we have multiple sections of code that do have objective standards. We have areas that have outlined how wide sidewalks need to be, how wide bike facilities need to be, what the configuration of driveways can be that can make streets more walkable and more accessible. We have bike parking requirements, incredibly robust bike parking requirements, and we have existing requirements for transit passes. One of the issues that we see is that often these elements can add cost, and they are ones that frequently have folks take concessions and waivers on them. I had a great conversation with Chair Kelly earlier today about TDM ordinances and the elements that we would love to see in our community. So strict requirements for multimodal programs to be required as part of development. And there's a reason why we can't require those in the same way that some of our neighbors can. And it tears down from the Federal Clean Air Act and then state implementation plans. And we are very lucky to live in an area that has clean air. But as a result of being in an attainment zone, we don't have any legal teeth to be able to require a TDM ordinance. Like the whole Central Valley, the South Coast Air Quality Management Zone, where the air is not good, there is a health and safety link between transportation demand management, it's called something slightly different in that section of the code, but other options, TDM, and we don't have those same tools. So ours are ones that you can take concessions and waivers on still. My team is working, we're interviewing peer agencies, seeing if anyone has cracked this code, areas that are in attainment zones, if they have ways that they have been able to craft creative code to be able to get robust TDM programs and ordinances in that folks are not taking concessions and waivers on. And so far we have not cracked that code. Some of the things that we are recommending is still having more and more sections of our code have objective standards in them and make sure that they are things that make projects good projects, that make them desirable to live in, that make them desirable for the neighborhood, that make them places that if you're not providing parking or providing less parking because you want a denser project that is in a walkable and bikeable and transit-focused neighborhood, you have options to do those things. So what we would like to do is turn the active transportation plan, the projects within there, into more robust code language and more direct code language and really focus on some of these high priority corridors that we have to get that in there. And then also to continue to strive for a more and more enforceable TDM ordinance. And that might be listed in multiple sections of the code, but to continue to write objective standard code language that lays out a more multimodal environment that we have outlined in the code, even if people will continue to take concessions and waivers when they must, but to at least have that framework of what we want to see in there. So the big question there, does this match the values and priorities of our community? Are there other areas that maybe you have seen or explored or worked within that we're currently not hitting, or things that come up in community conversations or with the public or with developers that we currently don't do that could be a good idea? This is admittedly an area that I get really frustrated because I feel like we can write, you know, really good code language and have really good goals and values in our code, and sometimes they don't happen.
So I'll just say for my part, when I think about objective standards, this is just a generalization, but again, the outliers are just cut off from consideration, and attempts to come up with a truly creative solution may be just scuttled in the very beginning. I used to work for an architect that used to be on this board for quite some time, and he said, give me a set of rules and I can design the most reprehensible building you can imagine, and give me no rules and I can do something beautiful. I'm not saying exclusively either or, I'm just saying that both things can be true. And so when we try to enact objective standards to, you know, as just a general set of controls on, you know, limiting development, that doesn't necessarily give us great results. And so, again, it's really hard to make effective policy, and I don't envy you.
So after our discussion, I was researching rapidly, as quick as I could before our meeting, what other cities are having the same constraints, and apparently San Diego has a very similar issue, and what they're doing is a point-based TDM system, where a development is basically given a menu, and based on what they want to do, whether it's transit passes or having a bike facility built, each one is worth a certain amount of points to kind of go to like a score for that objective standard in order to get the like certain concessions and so forth from the city. So I don't know if that could be explored, especially since it's
Similar to how we used to do green building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Exactly
okay.
how we used to do it.
I'll also say, our parking concessions where we do substitutions of bike parking for car parking, alternate times of day uses, those are the kinds of things that I believe really you can tailor to whatever you're trying to do. That feels like a way to achieve good results and not be just doing something to tick a box.
So a choice-based, having that in for this project, I think these would work for it. So I'm going to go for these points or these things that are options.
And that is just like Cal Green is now.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit on a project 8-3 on water. There's like a very enthusiastic developer who's like, I freaking love all this TDM stuff. Let's do it all. It's cheap, right? Compared to really much more expensive things. And it was really hard to like figure out what to do and how to support him. My takeaway was like a menu of options. Like, you know, developer, welcome to the city, thank you. Like a nice table, I'm kind of joking, glass of wine, here's your menu. Like, would you prefer the filet mignon, sir? Or are you just here for an appetizer? Right. And then those developers who are committed to spend money on this would have a way through. And those that are like, I hate this whole thing, could just, you know, put the solar walkway lights in, like the green building program, and pass their final inspection. So kind of like a range of choices.
That could allow for context sensitivity to say you are located on a high quality transit corridor. There's frequent transit that comes, transit oriented tools might be a good fit. Say you're not, your bus only comes every 60 minutes or 120 minutes. Maybe investing in biking, walking, carpooling, other things might be better tools for the context that you're within. Mm-hmm. Yep, any of it, pogo stick.
So then I did do some writing about the question, and like like, that's really a hard question. I love it. Because our community is polarized and there's like extremes on both sides. And like you're saying, then that kind of like screws up getting anything helpful for the middle folks. And it's really just like, so I came down with this does match the values and priorities of the community. I hear a lot of feedback about, we hate this bike stuff, it's elite. You know, when I'm at the school playground talking to all my parent friends, like that is what I hear, you know? So I just want to acknowledge that a ton of the community like really doesn't like this stuff. A ton of people, as we've learned over and over, but like Westcliff just want this place to be like it has been forever. And, you know, like, let's lead with that. I mean, look at the neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are set up for fortress-like traffic calming around them. You know, we're already there, like, you know, along Mission Street. So, number one, protect the neighborhoods with extremely good traffic calming. First off, before we even go for that other stuff. Yeah, I get it. That wouldn't be as appealing for a grant or whatever, but I think that's what the people want to hear, quite honestly. I want to finish with, when I talk to young people, it's the reverse. Why are we bombing Iran? It's because of oil. I'm going to ride my skateboard. So I think if we prorated by age, you know, that might be another good way to look at it. So that's my comments on does it fit the community.
Yeah, I was about to say the conversation at the middle school is very different than the conversation at the elementary school.
I think a lens to consider here too is how we have built for the last generation and how we will build for the next. And I think that age inflection that you mentioned is really important. Something that I want to shout from the rooftops that I learned recently is we've been doing community outreach with our schools, talking about different transportation projects. And our Harbor High principal told us that Harbor averages 1,000 to 1,100 students per year. And on any given day, about 400 of them are riding e-bikes to school. On top of that, there's tons of analog bike users, there's walkers, and there's a ton of transit users as a result of Fare Free for Youth. So they have easily more than half their students arriving not in cars. And that trend is likely to continue if we're able to support it.
If I could add, Lee Butler, Director of Planning and Community Development, now just Community Development, sorry. It's a habit that's going to be tough to shake. I'll just note that as we're talking about this and the way that we're growing, one of the things that I convey to people is that we really don't have a choice as to whether or not we want to continue growing the way that we used to, because our roadways can't continue to expand and accommodate vehicles. So we are physically constrained by the ability to accommodate the transportation modes that some people may or may not want. We are going to grow. We know that. And we can't grow in the same way that we have in the past 100 years, where we're focused primarily on cars. We have to change. And this period of change is going to be challenging, in part because of the age discrepancies that you've been talking about, where, you know, older people have grown up depending on and relying on cars exclusively. And there will always be people that continue to need those vehicles for whatever reason. But the new development is going to need to have a much greater focus on these alternative modes of transportation. And we need to shift our investments and shift the way that we think about development and what is going to be accommodated with that development. Because really there isn't another option. We can't build enough capacity for all the cars that we would traditionally have seen in development projects and expect that our roadways are not going to be gridlocked, because they would be. And so we need to focus on these alternative approaches to getting people around.
I have a slightly different take on what's failing us now and where we might go with this. walk for exercise now, 4 to 5 miles a day on the west side. And there really are no areas on the west side where there's a complete a complete sidewalk system. I mean, none. And so just listening to this conversation brings me back to growing up in Minneapolis, which has a city with sidewalk systems that are just complete. There's no exceptions. There's a 6-foot sidewalk on either side of every street, anywhere. And so I had a 2-mile walk to school. I never had to walk on anything but a perfect sidewalk. And I didn't think of myself as put upon that I had to walk 2 miles. There was plenty to look at the whole way. Well, on the west side of Santa Cruz, there aren't any streets that have 6-foot sidewalks on both sides. 0. Mission Street, I guess, is probably the only one that comes to mind. So when I'm out for my walks, I'm particularly interested in houses that don't have sidewalks in front of them. And they're beautiful, expensive houses. And there isn't any reason why they couldn't be required to be in an assessment district that requires them to provide a sidewalk in front of their house within 5 years, or 5 months to my mind. But because it would have a big change in the quality of transportation in our city, because 2 miles gets you pretty much anywhere you need to go in Santa Cruz. And sidewalks are a pretty nice low technology solution. And quite frankly, near as I can tell, the young people in my neighborhood wouldn't have any trouble at all adapting to sidewalks as the principal way they get around. Not one, but a principal way, including kids who are old enough to drive, would still find walking on a nice sidewalk system a very attractive way to get around, and it's safe and it's cheap, and it doesn't require a massive public works project to happen. You could just pass a rule that says everybody has to have a sidewalk in front of their house. Period. No exceptions. Hillsides be damned. You got to have a sidewalk. And I don't think that is an unrealistic expectation. I think we could do that and have a big impact. I'm really stuck on 6 feet. A 5-foot sidewalk just is not a sufficient sidewalk width. And most of the neighborhoods that I do walk in that have sidewalks have 5-foot sidewalks. And you put a sign or anything, and it's not a sidewalk anymore. You can't walk two abreast. You can't swing your arms. You can't. So I'm all for providing an appropriate public transportation system, but even the public transportation systems require you to walk on a sidewalk to get to the public transportation. And if it's not there, it's a bigger impediment to using that transportation system than I think we acknowledge. It matters, and particularly for people with any kind of disability or with children. If you're a parent trying to take your children with you and you don't have a sidewalk, it's not a good idea anymore. So anyway, that's my rant. I think any transportation system that doesn't include a radically rethinking of the pedestrian quality of our city is just missing the boat.
Can I just reiterate something I've heard? I've heard a transit-first hierarchy. I've heard a pedestrian-first hierarchy and how those pieces fit together.
I'm all for this.
That, because I was going to say, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and I think sidewalks being really the building blocks of a transportation network.
One needs the other.
And I would say, as we think about sidewalks, we need to think about ramps as well. So full accessibility. And we like 6 feet as well. I know Commissioner Hammer has our active transportation plan that's in draft right now in front of her. There's some sidewalk policies in there, different methods to achieve a more built-out sidewalk network. I'd love to chat with you more about those. Same wavelength here.
Okay, so I'm so happy that you brought up sidewalks because I thought I was going to be the only one that thought that this was priority number one. And so I'm going to just maybe also have my own little sidewalk tangent if we can. So I read through the amazing transportation plan and it was so wonderful because it was data and I love data. And it actually got me asking for more data. So I was looking up fatal, they're called FSIs. They're
Fatal and severe injury.
Thank you. Fatal severe injuries. So per capita, Santa Cruz's number is 39. And Capitola is 19. So ours is approximately 40. Theirs is approximately 20. That means that we're twice as dangerous as Capitola. And interestingly, San Francisco is 35. So we're more dangerous than San Francisco in our FSI per capita numbers. And that makes a lot of sense because my friends in San Francisco always complain about getting like driven over when they're riding their bikes. And I'm like, well, you have sidewalks and we don't. And so I also live on the west side. My daughter every day goes to and from school. She went to kindergarten in Minneapolis and loved sidewalks in Minneapolis, so I get that. But next year she's going to Santa Cruz High. And I made her write a list of all the pros and cons of Santa Cruz High versus PCS. She's choosing Santa Cruz High, but in the cons list, she said, it's gonna be horrible. I don't know how I'm gonna be able to walk to school. It's a little over a mile away, which is not a big deal, but it's the sidewalk problem. She doesn't know how to cross Mission safely, and she doesn't, and in that active transportation plan update, the goal is to have sidewalks within a quarter of a mile of all schools, but children live more than a quarter of a mile from a school. So there's also, so basically the active transportation plan calls for 3 miles of additional sidewalks, even though we're missing 45 miles of additional sidewalks. We're missing 45 miles of sidewalks in the city of Santa Cruz, according to the active transportation plan. So I think we need to plan for 45 miles sidewalks. And I know you're like, how can we pay for this? We can't pay for it. And, you know, even if our our impact fees like tripled, like where would we get that money? I don't know the answer to that, but we really, really, really need sidewalks. And to your point, I live on the Upper West Side. And so right now when there's a tear down of like a fancy house and then there's like a new 6,000 square foot house, they're required to build a new sidewalk. However, the little sidewalk ends in a mailbox post and a parking sign. So my daughter will ride her scooter on like 8 feet of sidewalk that are all new and pretty, but then she'll have to get off her scooter and go on the street because there's a sign or like a landscaping of a house that hasn't been torn down yet. So I don't think our sidewalk ordinance is working. We need to take accountability as a city to recognize that we have a very dangerous situation, that our pedestrians are getting hurt more than in San Francisco, and we need to build sidewalks. Like, we need to understand that this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And other cities do this by having taxes and taking responsibility and having beautiful urban planners such as yourself design beautiful streetscapes that include bump outs and include traffic circles and include sidewalks that all fit together. And then like one last thing, I was born in Denmark. I spent a lot of time in Denmark. In more rural areas, like, and I'm thinking Upper West Side, what they do when, to basically save money for bike paths is they have a bike path and a sidewalk combined. And so you have different colored pavement. So the pedestrian gets one color of the pavement and the bike path gets the other color of the pavement. And that's the like lowest level of bike path that you could possibly find in Denmark, because that's for the cheapo suburbs. Like you'd see something fancier in all the cities. But anyway, I feel like it can be done. And we need to not rely on like private developers or like a one-by-one piecemeal, because it's not working. It's just not working. Okay, I think that's it.
If I can choose commissions, I'll come back here when I have some big ideas.
Well, I do, what I'd like to see is much more data in there so that city council can understand that compared to other cities, we have a very dangerous pedestrian landscape. Because I think that they just aren't educated to know that. I mean, I know that sounds patronizing and obnoxious, but we need more data to show that. And then right now, I think are spending $3 million for sidewalks and $17 million for bike paths. That's not fair. It needs to be at least definitely the other way around, because your transportation plan also says that we have more people commuting to work by foot than by bike. So that means that we need to invest in pedestrians more than bike paths. All right, I'm stopping.
I'll just say, coming soon is our safety action plan, which focuses on the safety stats on our roadways and makes informed recommendations based upon that. So it's a companion document and is a required document in that format in order to access funding stream. So they're a little separate, but look forward to that. It's coming to our Transportation Commission in June and to council in August.
I think bikes are sexy. I just bought one because I'm turning 50, but you guys are totally right. Sidewalks first, 100%. That's so great. Claire, would it affect your ability to get grants? Like if we said we want all the money to go to sidewalks? Well, whatever, 90%.
No, I think that we have, the next grant actually that we're scoping right now is to build out all the sidewalks in that plan. So that's the first thing that we're looking to implement from that plan.
But that's not 45 miles. That's just it's not enough.
At asterisk that the list is expanding based on the public comment that we've gotten, and we have a 10-year planning horizon on that. So we had all the sidewalks that we had, we needed to prioritize in some way, because for funding purposes, saying all of it is not as compelling of an argument. It's not saying, we went out, we talked to people, and people told us that these are the most important places for them to walk and bike. These are the areas that we've prioritized in our community that you should give us funding in order to implement these. So I think generally what we do is take a tiered approach where we have that. Here's our plan. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we want to take on. And I call it the Swiss cheese model. And then after that, we have the onesie twosies. You're doing development in your neighborhood or to your house. You need to build out the sidewalk in front of your property. And then we also, have the other levers. Maybe a different project is going on. We're repaving a street. Escalona recently, we installed sidewalk on as part of a pavement project. So we also look to capture as much sidewalk we can and ramps that we can in projects like that. And so we try to layer with all the different tools that we have in different ways that we think we can get more complete streets infrastructure in. So absolutely. And so what a really helpful piece I heard here is that as we craft various things that we want to do to address transit proximate developments is take a pedestrian first hierarchy.
Yeah, and maybe I'm wondering if there's some clever consultant out there from our that can recommend how we can get a more stable funding stream other than grant funding. I know that's asking for the moon.
Oh yeah, we have some recommendations.
Okay,
Can't wait to bring them back.
Okay, great.
Yeah, a lot of different tools. I'm looking forward to working on, because that's exactly funding is what it comes down to. For scale, the project that we did on Escalona was a paving project. It was $3.9 million, and 50% of that was sidewalk. 50% was repaving, and the other 50% was the sidewalk and 50 curb ramps.
And that was filling in 10 properties?
10 frontages and 50 ramps.
I think that's the scale, right? And sidewalks are a cheap form of infrastructure, but they're still often building something new, which is where that cost issue really comes up for us. And I think one thing with the sidewalks and how we choose projects in this plan, a lot of it is about the safety element to it. Where can we create something really beneficial for the whole roadway network to improve safety? And the missing sidewalk network isn't often on our arterial roadways, Laurel Street, Ocean Street, SoCal, where we do have a lot of these pedestrian and bicyclist and vehicle collisions. It's more missing out in the neighborhoods where there's less of the safety issue. And so there is a bit of a, when we go for like a grant and funding and those things, solving that safety problem is where you can really get money most effectively. And so there is that sidewalks. We share the passion for the sidewalks, and I was looking at our standard detail to make us change it to say 6 foot preferred. We says 5 foot minimum for that width there, which is an easy change, but it's funding them. It's just a really challenging element to getting them in these spots where they're missing right now. So I love that idea about some sort of special funding district or some element like that to ensure we have a cohesive sidewalk network citywide.
One technique that I've seen in cities that we're facing essentially what we have is to, first of all, set the standard that is expected for the city uniformly. And then for folks who don't meet that standard now, essentially, this is, I'm not inventing this, the property owner knows that they have to pay for putting a sidewalk in, but they can pay for it over a 5-year period of time, so that it is something that they can self-finance, for that matter. But then that city can come in and say, but we want the sidewalk done right now, and essentially give them the opportunity to pass on the pay it over 5-year plan to the city, so that the sidewalk gets built in the first year, and the city gets comes up with the money, but with the understanding that they, over that 5-year period, will get tax money from the property owner, so that we get the sidewalk at the beginning of the 5-year period of time. And the property owner is essentially financing it over 5 years by paying it to the city as an additional tax, because it really is crucial. I love the fact that Escalona now has somewhat better sidewalks. They're not particularly great sidewalks. They're 5 feet wide instead of 6 feet wide, and that's not a small difference. So I really like the notion that as a city, we set what the standard is, and then convince property owners that they have an obligation to provide a safe place for pedestrians on their frontage, and then figure out how to shake people's genes so that we've got the money to pay for doing this over a really short period of time. Because I think that although the electric bikes are very popular now, there's I can attest to it because I grew up with it, there's a social culture of walking together on a sidewalk that's wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side, which is not a 5-foot sidewalk. And essentially have a different kind of social life for people who are pedestrians. This isn't crazy. We're not inventing this. I think figuring out a way to make it possible for folks to just say, this is something I'm going to have to pay over the next 5 years, and everybody has to do it, so nobody's just beating up on me. And there are a few people in town who have 6-foot sidewalks already, and they are feeling pretty good about this. But I don't think this is a small matter, and I think it actually changes the social life of kids. There's a kind of social life that you have walking with your friends on a 6-foot sidewalk, because you can actually walk side by side.
And be safe.
And be safe, exactly, and separated from the cars. Rant over.
No, I'm in agreement on every point. I have a 90-year-old grandmother, or 90-year-old mother-in-law who even now hauls her little trolley to the supermarket and goes to town for her, she doesn't own a car. But did I hear you correctly that 10 houses cost $3.9 million? So the 5-year plan, I don't see a lot of people being able to come up with $400,000 in
Right.
5 years.
And that's why I actually don't think it's appropriate and practical for each homeowner to do it on their own, because that's when you end up with random mailbox posts and parking signs and utility poles. That's
But
similar.
if it was, I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. And so that's why I really want the city to come up with a magical funding stream for this that's consistent and reliable.
Because it would be great if it was planned and beautiful and
Yeah.
had all the elements you wanted. But that, I think that does take, assessment districts or something like that. But, and I know many communities, Oakland, Berkeley, they have assessment districts for street side improvements that someone pays into over, until various deities come back. But I've myself have been frustrated by this, kind of higgledy-piggledy replacement, because over time even, the details that get used are changed. So when I was working on my own house, we planned to put a sidewalk in, we got a permit for it, we had it formed, reinforcing steel in place, ready to pour. We called out Public Works to come and inspect it. They said, oh, this is the wrong detail. You have to redo all this. So we had to tear everything out, and then they changed the detail again. So everyone has, to either side of us, they have the detail that I think is better, which has plantings and, but it was a function of this idea that, well, we'll just sort of franchise the idea of the street side improvements, and we'll just make it, piece by piece. So I'm completely in agreement with the goals that you're stating. I think that the mechanisms to do them, and this is something that's come up for me in reading through this stuff a lot, I think it has to not be balkanized. I think it has to be a community effort, and I think you have to. And also, when you're dealing, I'm going to presume that Minneapolis and a lot of Minnesota is fairly flat, and when people are trying to put sidewalks up on Escalona and these other places, you have to cut a lot more flat area to do it, and you widen the roadway and everything else. And I think that, again, you make a rule and it just doesn't comport with the outliers.
What I hear is a big interest in solving for our pedestrian network and for sidewalks, and an openness to having a variety of ways to pay for that. And that likely it would be good to come back with some on the spectrum of opportunity from all community to all individual, and land likely somewhere on a mix of those, or maybe multiple tools that could be in place.
Matt, can you clarify the number of intersections addressed with that 3.9 million?
Yeah,
Like approximately, not to quiz you, but it's a good chunk of them. I walked that a lot.
yeah, I think I wanted to clarify the cost. It wasn't 3.9 million for the 10 sidewalk properties. That was like
3.9 million for all of the
Total.
paving
The whole thing,
from
including the asphalt.
Grandview all the way over to Highland?
Yeah, that's right.
Highland, and it included 10 frontages of sidewalk, 50 curb ramps.
That's what you're saying. So
Yeah,
10
but a
houses
lot.
got
It was
the
a-
frontage, yeah. Got it.
Yes,
yes, it's still multiple zeros.
sidewalks not cheap.
Because each one of those, as you know, is like an engineering marvel balancing between pedestrians and drainage. I mean, it's just the work that went in there is awesome. So thank you.
All right, next.
Landlines, topic 3. So landlines essentially illustrate future conditions for the public right away. Most recently, and where we will be taking these on, is for the downtown expansion plan. As you've likely seen in that document, we've identified the future condition for transportation infrastructure, and we've identified cross sections. Development doesn't all happen, though, all at once, and it doesn't build out like SimCity. You're going to have one project come in on one side of the street, and then one come in half a block down on the other. And so determining what determining what that is going to look like on a surveyed plan set. Where is the center line of the road? Where will that bike facility start? Where will that sidewalk facility end? What does that look like for the built shape and the buildable area there? And how does it relate to the buildings around it is what we are going to be taking on. Because we've just adopted the downtown plan and we know that we're going to have development coming in there, we anticipate significant development coming in the future. That's where we're planning to start. And we do plan on doing this over multiple years and really using potential development pressure as a driver of where we determine to work on next. Our idea at this time is to start with the downtown plan and then work on SoCal. And is that right? Are those the top priority areas after downtown? Is SoCal the next important, or is it somewhere else? Or where should we take on after SoCal if that is the next important area?
I agree. I think it's the most important, but.
Does SoCal have a specific plan? I don't think it does. As I was thinking of like the Ocean Street, we got a lot of great plans, and those already are in the top of mind for those cross sections, right?
Yeah.
So they could be better, like the Ocean Street. Some are kind of old, but those have those cross sections to my memory.
Yeah.
That was my thought. Was like, just grab all those and improve them slightly and go. But my number one, and I'm just gonna, is the rail trail. I mean, like 100 years from now, I envision that as maybe 1,000 years as Denmark, the rail trail with high density, multimodal transportation, wonderful cobblestones, kids walking to school without getting hit by cars. So we are winning awards, hot damn, but like, let's take it to the next level and throw some plan lines in there. They're gonna be right through people's backyards. It's gonna be super hot and controversial. I think that's a path to maybe like one day clean up the really compromised parts of the rail trail, the transformer by New Leaf, right? It's gonna take a long time to move that and a ton of money, but that stinks. That would never happen in Europe, right? Never would happen. And I don't wanna complain, I love the trail, but the whole Bay Street, California, like that, if the bikes were in charge, that would go straight through and the cars would deal with it, right? So let's think about that like long-term, and I get it, there's political consequences there, but let's plan the rail trail. Let me just finish my comments.
No, please.
All the nodes on all the corridors, we talked about this in the failed corridor planning process, but that's already low-hanging fruit. I'm sure you're on it already, but the spots where.
Might not want to use the word corridors.
Yeah, it's okay, I've accepted it. Yeah, whatever you want to call it. And then I'm just thinking of timing, like this is a painful thing. It might be better to kind of just do the whole city, that top-down approach. If funding's available and staff time, and,
It's not.
I know. Okay, I'm dreaming, but it's gonna be hard to do it.
You mentioned nodes. So there's probably some particular intersections around the city that are in your head that are like, wow, this is just not aligned right or something. Is that what you meant by that? Like there's key,
Yeah.
if you have them, we'll take them down. Because I think you're right, there's a handful of funky spots. We were just talking
like
about
the
Mission and
Morrison
Bay this
Safeway
morning.
one,
Yeah. Yep.
You just walk your way down. Everywhere there's a big building going up or a big empty lot.
Yeah.
The infamous, Seabright, Rio, that whole area. I'm not gonna have a comprehensive list, but that's what I've got. Let me think and I'll get you more by email. If I have any particular ones. Last one. Is it possible, use this as a tool to eliminate gas stations one day?
Great question for Lee Butler.
Lee, I'm thinking of we had a different thing, but we many years ago had a drive-through application at like a Burger King. and a commissioner righteously pointed out that all city policies are against drive-throughs. And so we did this whole planning commissioner thing where we made them have to interface with Caltrans to do anything to their driveway, and that killed the project. And so if we talk about killing projects as a positive, I'd like to take out all gas stations
as we
as
have
soon as
for 50
possible.
years, yeah.
I'm playing a bit here, but these are important things, so just think about that, like kind of the long term. You don't have to answer, Lee, but.
From a land use perspective, yes, I mean, we can prohibit new gas stations. There's also amortization processes where you can say certain uses need to go away over time. So from a perspective of can we legally do it? Yes, there are mechanisms to do it. From a practical perspective, right, we're a long way from that.
Okay. That's all I have to say, just a couple of small things.
I will hold. I'm talking too much.
I would just add as an intersection note, the one across, I guess it's a Walgreens now. Do you remember that project we were talking about with that back alley? Over on it's by the Whalers Car Wash over there.
Yeah.
Whatever that street is right there.
Trevathan. and
Trevathan.
Park, yeah.
That's it.
It sounds like SoCal is a good one to focus on. And we're also in the downtown, so the order of downtown expansion plan, SoCal does seem to be the agreed priority here. And then general nodes around the city too.
I think Broadway is going to become key in that whole process, where it goes to cross the river.
Broadway at Ocean.
No, at the river. And
And then
sort
at
of
San
over to
Lorenzo into
Pacific.
Laurel.
I think that's going to become a crucial spot.
Broadway to Frederick,
Yes.
all the way down.
Well, I'm actually thinking right in the south of the
Between
downtown
the river
plan
and
expansion,
Riverside, right there.
Laurel Street, yes. I think that's
Bridge, yeah.
going to become a high-pressure area. I mean, it is now, but I think with what's contemplated, it'll be huge.
So then the far west side one at both of those far west side, Western, and then that next one kind of into town by the Hampton Inn. They're lower priority, but they need some help. Those are terrifying intersections. In anticipating more growth on the west side, they'll become more important.
I think I would suggest a standard sidewalk width of 6 feet that is always net of other obstructions. That means that signs and street lights and whatever have to find some other place.
I would add to that that could be a minimum, because there's many other areas in our
yes.
code that we have an 8-foot, a 12-foot.
Oh, yeah. That's certainly not adequate for downtown, but the minimum in single-family neighborhoods in particular, that 6 feet is the minimum, and it's a clear dimension. You don't get to put signs or fire hydrants or any number of other things, because that's just a barrier. And I don't think that's crazy at all, because I know other cities get away with it. So.
Can I ask you a follow-up to that? I have pretty strong feelings about street trees, and I have strong feelings about sidewalks. And sometimes those things are at odds. Where do you think a street tree should go?
Well, ideally, between the 6-foot sidewalk and the back of the curb. And, but that's, sometimes difficult. I think there are places downtown that after the earthquake where we did tree grates and street trees. And as long as we've got 6 feet beyond the trunk, as it were, we can make that happen, because we did in areas downtown after the earthquake. So it's just, the sidewalk really needs that 6-foot width to function the way it ought to, which is a transportation and social corridor. You don't don't have a social quarter unless you can walk side by side, and you can't walk side by side unless you have 6 feet.
I want to make a comment on the trees. I like them in the medians, like right in the middle, because it kind of creates a barrier. If you are crossing the street, it's kind of a safe way when you're getting to the other side. That's usually my ideal where having a tree is, because it creates purpose, exactly.
I also think a lot of opportunities exist with the bulb outs, and, you know, if you, sort of on Pacific, you have a few spaces and then you have a bulb out that comes into the road, and I think that's a good opportunity for those kinds of things. And then you can do it where the street and the sidewalks are more compact. You know, it's so nice on Pacific when you have the 10, 12-foot sidewalk, as you're saying. But even in the places where if you're not trying to squeeze the tree into that 6 feet at all, then, and that can be done kind of regularly, so it is like a street rhythm.
I will add that I definitely second the 6 street minimum for the sidewalk, and I would like to see kind of two birds killed with one stone here, where sidewalks are also considered street calming measures, because on the Upper West Side, where you have really extremely large, wide streets, they're too wide, we could put our 6-foot sidewalk and then also put a greenway, and still have plenty of room for parking on both sides of the street. We could do that, honestly, and it would force traffic calming because everybody would be forced to slow down. So it kind of acts like a bump out. And in terms of like forced plantings, I've seen in many cities, people just rip up the trees, you know, when they're required to be planted. So I wouldn't require a forced tree planting, but I would require a green space, because that does lead to happier pedestrians. And especially in residential neighborhoods, you can afford to take up as much space as you want, because again, it's another traffic calming measure. So it's the two birds with one stone thing.
Unbundled parking, our next topic. Unbundled parking is pricing and selling parking or renting parking separate from the cost of the residential unit. This currently lives in our Muni Code, and it is a method to potentially lower housing costs for car-free or car-light households. So currently, what our municipal code says is essentially that you may unbundle parking. And you may do it when other parking management on street is met, so you have parking management within 500 feet. Often what that means is time-based, price-based, or permit-based parking controls on street. This is one of the areas that council did direct us to look at, and there are some things that we could do here. We could change that may to a shall, that parking shall be unbundled. It could be for all projects. That could be for projects of 25 units, 50 units, 100 units, where parking's provided. We could remove the requirement for street management. The concern here is that if you price the parking within the building and there's no controls on the street, people likely aren't going to choose to pay for parking within the building, and the spillover parking will happen, and you'll have a very expensive empty garage as part of a structure. And we could also consider who and how are people eligible in new development for on-street permits, and this links into the next topic we'll have as well. This is an area that we've seen used some, but not extensively. So a lot of questions here, I think. What's the right size for requiring unbundling parking if we seek to require it? How big makes sense? In areas that we don't currently have on-street parking management, should this trigger that if you're going to do unbundling in an area? Would that trigger be a residential parking zone, or would it be maybe parking removal in the area and use that space for something else? Often what comes up that we hear at Commission and Council is when there is discussion about a new parking management zone, the question is, who pays for that to get set up? Is that the developer? Is that the city? Is that some unheard of entity? And then also, what if the surrounding neighborhood doesn't want parking management? You know, often we hear that it's a hassle to get a parking permit, or I don't want to pay for a parking permit, or I don't think that's the right fit for my neighborhood. And how do these pieces fit together? And then finally, should residents of new development be eligible for on-street parking permits? And this links to the next topic we'll talk about as well. And this is a topic that we hear a lot as a way to, I think as Commissioner Kennedy mentioned, protect those existing neighborhoods that feel like change is coming to them and that new neighbors will change the way their current neighborhood feels. So let's exclude them from a parking management district. Another approach could be have a tiered approach that maybe not every address gets the same number of permits, but that development gets a certain number, something like that. So curious if you think that unbundling is a tool that we should alter from how it's currently in our toolbox, and if so, ways that you would adjust it that you think would be a good fit for our community. This is one that I'll also add that I think is a great theoretical parking management tool, and I have a lot of questions about the practice of it, especially the practice 5 years after the development's in place, 10 years after, 15 years after.
I can talk some more.
I'm feeling the same way. I've got lots of things to say.
I think my only comment is to give some flexibility to the developer on this one because they usually have really strong feelings in my experience.
Thank you all for listening. I have a lot of feelings, issues, but they're really important. So I felt like 40 units was like the right size, and that's my gut. I work on a lot of affordable housing projects. There's a lot of kind of apartment, 3-story, West Side Village, right over, that's framing up right now. Beautiful 3-story building. Kind of looks big, but we'll get used to it. That's 40 unit, 38, I think. It's got a bunch of surface parking. But that was my like break-even point thought, to put an arbitrary thought on it.
But it does have parking, like you said.
But if it didn't, I think 40 is where like a couple people might take the bus passes, and you know, there might be a little bit of management support. I don't know. It's very hard.
There's probably research that could be done on that.
And as the second question, it absolutely should trigger the required parking management, in my opinion. I lived in Berkeley for a long time, so I'm really used to kind of, socialist authoritarian parking planning. It's great. It's so good for pedestrians and bikes. Yeah, and it should mean the establishment of a residence. Otherwise, right, why am I going to park there if it's free right there? That was my thought. Who's responsible for the cost? I don't know. I'm going to punt on that one. What if the surrounding neighborhood does not want? That's like each one of these we've lived, Claire and Matt and Lee, and oh man, it's just there's no good. I tell everyone this is like flawed and it's broken, and you have no good options, neighbor, because you're either going to get the pain in the ass of paying $30 for a parking permit and for getting it, and then getting it, like there's just no. Everyone agrees it's terrible. Okay. Then I feel extremely strongly about the last one. Like health in all policies is about equity. And when people do this, like, well, these new people don't get to park on my street, it really rubs me the wrong way. The food bin one, in particular, where the neighborhood has tons of capacity for parking and they want to just, well, I shouldn't single out those neighbors. The instinct is to make this little island where we're protected, but that doesn't work because you can go to the other side of the island so easily, right? So we talked about this a lot, the high cost of free parking, and like, how do we implement these big zones that might overlap with the assessment districts? Like, where are those lines? So those are my comments there.
Go ahead, Miguel.
I'm going to be probably heretical and say that I believe that most parking control programs simply shift the problem to the next next neighborhood along. I lived in the East Bay for a long time. It was always permits around the university and other, high pressure locations. I think that is something else that drives a lot of this. But you would just have donut by donut grow out and out and out. And I feel like that is just a feature. It's not a glitch. It's just something that happens whenever you create these. And to my mind, I'll just tell a little story. There was a competition that we did as an office, an architectural office, to design the best garage for exotic cars. And our entry was the, pop-up cover, that you unfold over the car that was parked next to the garage that was full of legal file boxes and other debris and errata of your life. Because to a degree, when we do these programs, that's what we're protecting. We're protecting people's ability to do that. And it doesn't feel like equity. It's sequestering public property for private use. So that's my rant. And I know that would get me burned at the stake by many people, but.
Well, I'm going to have gas after gas stations, so I'll be right there next.
Before this evening, literally this afternoon, I counted parking spaces in my own neighborhood. And
I do that too.
There's 20 apartments and 40 houses, and each of the properties has a parking space that's proprietary to them that represents one parking space per bedroom. So the studio apartments have one parking space that's proprietary that is theirs, but then there are 24 parking spaces on the street, and I've lived in the neighborhood now for 30 years, I guess, and you can always find a place to park on the street, except maybe after 11 o'clock at night. So my sense is that it isn't impossible to actually park for the demand. This notion that you can never have enough parking, I don't buy into that, because my neighborhood seems to be parked just fine. It is very rare coming home late at night, I can't find some place to park my car. And I mention this only in the sense that actually coming up with the math that provides parking that people can actually live with isn't crazy. We can do this. And it does have a relationship to the number of bedrooms. And I still think that's a useful metric to use. I don't know that we can do this in a way that's going to prove 100% of the time to work, but pretty close. The co-housing project on Western Drive works out just fine, and that's essentially what they have, and it seems to work for them too. So a ratio to parking spaces to bedrooms, I think, is actually a useful tool.
So I want to know if your garage is full of barbells?
Yeah. Yeah, but there's a driveway in front of it.
The other thing that I think Matthew, Commissioner Thompson reminded me of is that when you have let me formulate this. Does anyone else have anything to say? I feel like I'm just taking up all the air.
In my opinion, I think that we need to kind of link it, bundled parking with street management. I don't have the luxury where I'm living where street parking is abundant, especially in the summer. Every space is taken. We've gotten to a point where a neighbor puts out cones so they can park there. So it's just not an area where, it's not easily managed. So it has to have the street management. But at the same time, right now, like, I'm in the zone where it's a $30 permit per year, and that's basically a subsidy, in my opinion. And all our neighbors have driveways and garages and so forth. Mine's filled with bikes. We only have one vehicle. We would go without the vehicle if we could, but with 3 kids, that makes that more challenging. But yeah, so like having I think in my opinion, parking maximums is something we could explore. And in having more limited parking, it's going to start causing a change too on how we behave and how we get around town and how we store what we have.
It's following on both of those comments. Is there any ability of the city to tie parking, extract revenue based on how many cars someone owns? Is there,
Well, look, kind of.
okay,
Brings us to this next topic
All right.
here.
Not ready for that. I have a couple
You're not
questions.
ready for that?
Yeah. Can I ask them a couple questions?
You can't
well,
hold.
no, it's really, I just think on my road, same thing, that you can find parking, it's not, but my wife and I got rid of our second car, we have one car that we share, I walk to work, it's just, try to live the dream, whatever, but our neighbors, also a couple with an ADU behind, and they do have, I think one of their kids is returned home now, but they have 6 cars. And they don't use their driveway even. It's dedicated to the people that live in the ADU, but no one parks there. And so right there's a density problem. But a parking permit would not solve that.
It may. What I would say is, because right now, we'll get
Convince
this.
me.
I'll let, after I say this one comment, I'll let you ask your questions. When we get into the parking permits, one of our questions is it the right number? And should they be a flat rate, $30? Would they park in the driveway if the first was $30, the second was $60, the third was $100, the fourth was $150, and the fifth was $200? I'm making these numbers up. But so that so you had an incentive to maybe clear out your garage or park in your driveway or use your off-street because there's a financial lever.
And that raises money for the city and for other impacts.
It might make us break even.
But someone,
Yeah.
a lot of people won't care about that.
Yeah.
They'll just,
Nearly everybody.
they'll pass it on to whoever's living in the ADU or, it's hard, it's the nuance of rulemaking, but it doesn't feel to me like that's necessarily the solution. I don't know.
I kind of mimic, because I have another neighbor, 6 cars. They park those in the driveway, but then they rent their unit out to students, and they have their own cars, and they do the street parking. So that cost, even if it's $200, that student's the one that's going to be paying that cost.
Or the boat.
Or, yeah.
We've had the boat, yep.
Can we do a show of hands, like who has permit parking in front of their house? I do. Okay.
I don't use it though.
Yeah. Just it's your context, whether you gotta go down there every January and shovel out your $30.
I was gonna, around the parking and the curb space in front of your house, which is very valuable, is it fair to assume that you might have to walk a block or two to get to your on-street parking? Or that's where we hear some conflict, right? A lot of people want to have the parking spot in front of their house, but do you think in a future system where we're managing the supply more effectively, would it be okay to walk a block?
In my opinion, yes.
Well, according to my neighbor, the answer is no. She doesn't feel safe walking that block.
And we have the cones. We had a neighbor, in fact, that put cones out even when there were no.
Just on principle. I don't know, I mean, I'd say like, my idealist part says yes, when I'm dropping my mom off, she's 76, hell no. I want to pull up as close to that puppy as I can. So both answers.
That's what double parking is.
When I lived in a city with 6 feet sidewalks, I walked a couple blocks to my parking space, from my parking space on the street to my apartment, and it was fine. But now I think it would be dangerous because I don't have sidewalks. And so in the dark, I'm always afraid I'm going to run over someone. And if I were walking in the dark to a parking, to like my house, it wouldn't be, I would have to like wear a little neon vest, which I do have.
Yeah, I think so. This is a good one that ties back into the sidewalk network is requiring people to walk also requires us to have a good sidewalk network. So the way that parking permit maybe works could be different by the neighborhoods where they do have a complete sidewalk network, like more like downtown versus maybe the Upper West Side or something. Do you think we should have available street parking on every street so that people can show up and drop their mom off in front of their house? Or what's like in the residential neighborhoods, should there be that supply available if we're gonna try to manage it more effectively?
I'm all for more parking maximums, so.
And we have drop-off zones downtown. There's no reason you couldn't distribute, kind of no parking or temporary parking. You called them T5 or something like that in the document. I think I saw that. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was one of the things I was reading to educate myself about this. But there are different designations for kinds of parking, and we don't really do anything, like I say, nuanced. It's all either draconian or nothing. That's the way it feels. So.
Okay, yeah, we can get more creative with it. We are looking into ways to retrofit city fleet vehicles to actually collect parking data in the neighborhood. So for example, you could put a little counter on your garbage truck and it would sample all the streets as it goes around and actually provide that data to us. So that's something we're looking into, and a tool that I'll now allow us to transition to our next topic that we're thinking of using in our, how we do this street parking program.
I
So
think if you ask 10 people at Bayview, like 9 of them would say, I want the parking in front of my house to be my spot. I really do think that. So we need to work on that attitude, but it's going to take some time, sadly.
and one further comment I would say also is that many homes did have garages. Many of those garages we've encouraged to be converted to housing also. So the push-pull that we have and where the space is available has changed, and I think will continue to change as an opportunity. So our final topic of organized discussion before it's a free-for-all is our residential permit parking program. So these, you guys are familiar, are in areas that there is demand. We put them in to manage the demand on the street parking. And the goal is to give residents a better chance to park near their homes. Notably, it does not guarantee a specific spot. It's just within this area, you do have the ability. So what do we currently do? Each qualified address is allowed 5 permits per year. The permits are $30 per year. We do not have full cost recovery on this. It's between 66 and 77%, looking over the past couple of years. And when establishing a new permit program, it's outlined in the staff report, it takes upwards of 6 months. That process starts with us requiring neighbors to talk to each other with a petition of interest, to have those nuanced conversations that you often hear here. I absolutely want a parking district. I absolutely do not want a parking district. And to have to work that out a bit before we jump in and put we're the government, we're here to help lens on it. After the neighbors have agreed, at least 50% of them have signed this petition of interest, we go in and we have a formal voting process. There's the potential for appeals. Sometimes we go all the way to city council. And it's fairly involved to get there. One of the things that council asked us to look at is how could you modify this program, or how could you potentially streamline it? Because often what we hear at the time of entitlement is neighbors being very nervous and concerned about the impacts of new development on the parking in their proximate neighborhoods. proximate or semi-proximate even. So a couple tools that could be considered. The first is reducing the number of permits per address. Go from 5 to 4, and you've reduced by 20% the maximum number of cars that can park on a street. The second one is tiered pricing, as we mentioned, have the first one be a lower rate and each one subsequently increase in price, so that if you do have off-street parking, it could incentivize you to use it and use it consistently, not just because parking on the street is convenient, which could open up more space for either your current neighbors or your new neighbors. And the third is to potentially have a streamlined process that would go straight from a building permit application or a building permit being received to going to a vote of the neighborhood. The nuance there is, as you know, we often end up in discussions with proposed development projects in front of us for entitlements, but those projects might not end up happening. And when we have neighbors who are concerned at the entitlement process, who want to set up a permit, that maybe that project doesn't happen, we may have just added restricted zones in our community with not full cost recovery for a fear that's never realized. So I think linking it to the building permit would be a very strong tool to put in place to just reassure neighbors that there could be this tool in place, but it wouldn't happen until some change would occur in their neighborhood. So there's a lot of questions here too. I think neighborhood permit parking is one of the tools we reach for most frequently because it's familiar. We see it, we know how it works. Half of us live in permit zones already. It's an understandable, non-scary tool. So to that, being that it's frequently used, should the total number of permits per address be decreased from 5 to a lower number? Do you think that's a tool that we should consider? What is that right number? Should the pricing be tiered, or should it all continue to be flat rate? Should it maybe continue to be flat rate, but a higher flat rate? When we have new development come in, should there be a certain size that triggers that just streamlined approach where we're not gonna entertain the back and forth, you're gonna vote, and the downside here is if the vote is a no, you're excluded from the program for a minimum of 2 years. And then also thinking about how do we consider when along a given corridor or street segment, we have multiple projects going in. So maybe each of them would fall under a threshold we would consider, but taken together, they would feel like something very different in that area. Any ideas for how we think about development cumulatively and its impacts on surrounding neighborhoods? And then also, how far from a project is realistic to expect parking spillover? Often we hear from neighbors that maybe don't live 1 block over, but live 5 blocks over. Recently, I had a resident from near Neary Lagoon express fear that downtown was going to spill over into that neighborhood. Where should we draw the line on that we consider within this framework?
I have one quick question. The parking permits, was that including guest passes?
The guest passes, you can buy either daily guest passes, or you can get a total of 5 where 3 are resident and 2 are guests, and they function the same.
So annually, you could get up to 5 passes total, including guest passes?
Correct. Okay. And you can swap the guest for resident.
How do you feel about the idea of letting city council or like a city council member for their district, like have it, basically the community would go to them and then they would say yes or no, let's go put this to a vote. Like, would that be a good idea or a bad idea in your opinion?
I think it could be sliced both ways. I think if you have a council member who is really comfortable dealing with development and comfortable dealing with constituents and comfortable managing conflict, then that could be a great tool and a great opportunity. And I think if you have one that's maybe less engaged or less comfortable in that way, or maybe they're just getting hammered on project after project after project, I could see that being a really challenging thing that might not be implemented equitably.
I think, for example, if you lived in District 6, it would probably be fine. If you lived in District 4, that would be a huge problem. Like if you're Scott Newsom and you're dealing with all that downtown development, right, versus, say, Renee on the Upper West Side or, Lower West Side where there's almost none of that happening, that's a very different experience.
So I sent that map over. I was really thinking along these same lines, like the aligning the decision-making unit with the people it's gonna affect. And I don't know, Mike, when I look at that map, so like these new council districts are engineered to be more equitable in terms of race, income, et cetera. There they are. And there's just kind of interesting things that happen there, like the Upper West Side being linked to downtown in District 4. I feel really kind of equitable about that. Well,
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it out there, but
I'm just thinking about it in
I take Claire's
terms,
comments, but the council member is gonna own these decisions, like at their next election, whether they like it or not. And so even if they're naive or whatever, they need to realize that this is really gonna hit their districts hard. And I wish we had the gusto to do it like citywide, but then at least we could do big chunks. And I hear you, Newsom's taking all the housing and it's.
I'm just
hard
thinking
for
about it
him,
in
but-
terms of like a parking permit program. If you're talking about developing a parking permit program every time there's a 50-unit development, then that's going to be Scott's full-time job,
I hear you.
right? Rather than, which, okay, sounds complicated to me.
It's not the best answer, but
Sounds
I think it's
inequitable,
better.
yeah.
And my other idea would be to do all of these things kind of like coordinated within those zones, which is gonna be super hard. Not just the parking permits, but the other stuff too.
I mean,
A
what,
council person, if
No,
there is a big project, but they knew, because I know my neighborhood, I know 6 like the back of my hand, they knew that money would be better over there. Maybe they could move that, get a picture with the new project, it might work out well. And I truly think our city council people know their district extremely well. So I just want to throw that out there.
One of the challenges we have with districts and transportation is that doesn't perfectly mesh, which I think is the point you're getting at. And the way I see the lines drawn here is we'd end up with conflicts where there's 2 council members with it, right? Like development along Water Street, SoCal, Ocean. They're really close, and that spillover could start to bleed into multiple districts at once. So I think that could be challenging to implement.
Like between 1 and 2, it's like 2, you could see
1 and
see
2,
2
like
being
4
like,
and
everyone's
3.
gonna park in 1. Two. But we're having these fights already. It just would be an organized way to think about it, and it would give the politicians kind of a structure.
Go ahead.
I mean, one of the things Claire and I spoke about was that, like, if there's a certain, I like the threshold idea of, like, say, if you're dealing with, like, for example, a parking benefit zone, and, like, a bunch of projects go into there all at once, and there's a cumulative effect, it might be smart to comprehensively deal with the parking issues all together as one consolidated issue. And again, if there's a more isolated project that's big, like say, 100 units or something like that, it might not be a bad idea to consider just like an automatic parking program. And, the residents are gonna hate it, but they're gonna hate people parking in their neighborhood more. And so it might be beneficial to just say, look, like, we're just gonna do this. And maybe there's a way to evaluate whether that was hasty or it was not needed, and maybe that could be backed off. But I think that on some level, especially in certain districts, like for example, downtown expansion, or, if we're looking on the SoCal corridors, or just where we're expecting a lot of development, like we're gonna have to start comprehensively planning for the parking issue. Otherwise, we're gonna have, neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks because we didn't plan for it, right? Or places that you can't have a car because we didn't plan for it, right? So I think that there's something to be said for maybe just biting the bullet on this one and just saying, like, yeah, we're gonna do this if X, Y, and Z conditions are met. Just my opinion. And I also think that it's atrocious that the city is paying it all for any of this, like in terms of losing money on parking programs, right? And I think that needs to not be a thing.
All right, Commissioner McKelvey.
I just wanted to say, could you bring those maps up again? When I look at that map, this is, to me, this is far too granular a problem to delineate within any of those districts. There are so many different contexts within each one of those districts. You know, look at the above the highway portion of one as opposed to the below the highway portion, the part that's down in Beach Flats in number 2, as opposed to the part that, it's just, to me, it's got to be more responsive to whatever the more granular context is. That's just a general comment.
Has demand curb pricing been explored?
In concept,
Okay. How did that go?
our technology is a little lagging to be able to implement something at this time. I think we've used demand-based pricing downtown and in the beach area to drive where people park and had the highest pricing in the most desirable areas. That's been successful. In our residential zones where we don't have parking infrastructure, we don't have the tools at this time.
Yeah, I think getting the data so that we can see on this map where we do have a parking issue and where we don't, I do think would be really helpful to kind of inform this at the granularity that was needed. Yeah.
And it definitely changes seasonally.
Yeah, that's a good point. Over maybe an extended period of time, so you get more than just a snapshot of one quarter that's in the summer, or it might be useful to do that.
So I'd like to go back to what Mike said, which is really important. Part of my thought with the district was like, rather than staff having to fight all these problems, it could be the neighbors and, you know, outside of staff, because it's just obnoxious how much static y'all have to take on this thing. But like, why not $100 on that fee? That's ridiculous. Like, we're running a parking program as a deficit. Is that insane, or is it just me? Like, does San Francisco run parking programs at a deficit?
I don't know if anyone else runs them at a deficit, but our rates are fairly affordable.
Just depends on who's paying.
I agree, but
I'm a big advocate of the tiered system and lowering the number of cars per address. That's just me.
I guess my question would be, if the council thought $100 was appropriate, like, what could we do with that? And like, what would be the community benefit, or, you know, just kind of think about that, even if it's a no-go. And I get it, like, if I'm a poorer person, and that's a big deal to me. But currently we're paying $30, which divided by 12 is like, I'm renting the public spot in front of my house for $5 a month, John.
Half
That's
of that.
freaking insane.
Yeah, it's $2.
I pay that much to park and get a coffee downtown for literally 5 minutes, you know, whatever. So I just want to put that in perspective. So I'm sensitive to it, and it would be regressive.
I'm saying, shouldn't do that.
Fine, I got you. Okay. I think that's all of my comments.
I'm going to echo what Mike said. I like both lowering the number a little bit as well as doing a tier-based as we kind of move to an era where we're adopting people to this change, because it's been so long that this $30 permit program has been implemented.
I think just in the way I'm thinking about this in the bigger picture is that one of the few tools that we have to manage parking in the city is price, right? It covers pretty much all bases, from demand to, you know, changing behavior slowly over time and regulating, really. I mean, I think price is a very effective tool for changing behavior. And we're looking to change behavior not only in how many cars people have and how reliant they are on them, but where they park them and when. So I think that it's a good tool for the city, especially if we're running a deficit, right? That should not be happening. When I saw that, I cringed. I had a visceral reaction.
Me too.
You know?
When I first moved into where we are now, and our neighbor said you could get a permit for literally pennies, I thought he was not, you know, just saying, you know, it was cheap. I didn't realize he was literally saying that it was pennies.
So I hear,
If you want to have 6 cars, great, just pay for them. Pay your fair share. To have 40 cars, great. Love it. Let the free market regulate you.
So I'm hearing an openness to tiering the system, to potentially lowering the number of permits per address, and to, bottom line, not run a deficit.
Final stretch.
Now we have an open discussion with parking, and it can also be over. Is there anything we didn't cover? Is there anything that's like a bright flash of the obvious that maybe comes up every time that somehow we didn't capture? Other directions you want us to consider? Anything you want reflected here?
I'll just reiterate that I think that it's really crucial, kind of the scale of projects that these things are applied to. I think in general, we don't want to discourage people from developing housing. I know that there was the discussion in the material about bundling the parking, making the housing more affordable, but I don't know, is there actually, I read a lot of articles that said it makes sense, it's logical, but I didn't see, oh yes, it absolutely happened, you know. So I would love all this to be underpinned by actual data.
I have some comments on the transportation plan update. Just generally, is that okay? Okay. Can you tell me what an equity destination is?
We have them defined in the plan, so we worked with our unhoused service providers to get a list of primary destinations used by folks who are unhoused. So we have our safe sleeping sites, we have medical clinics, other high needs destinations.
Okay. All right, I guess my only other thing is the class 3, I think the class 3 bike lanes are where you have the cars and the bikes sharing the same lane. And I would say that's, I would comment that that's kind of like creating a hazard, a public safety hazard. And it's this idea like the killed by a traffic engineer kind of thing. Like you're engineering hazards when you, like currently Western is that. And I know you have plans to change that, which is great. But right now, poor little bikers are, really in danger every time they have that. And I think that it kind of, those shared bike lanes give a false sense of security for bikers, thinking that, oh, I'm allowed to be here because there's a bike, so I must be safe, when really they are not safe. So if we could redesign our plan to avoid creating more class 3 bike lanes, and instead just create real bike lanes, I think that would be definitely improve our fatality and significant injury statistics. Although I noted that there were no bike fatalities that were reported, whereas there were pedestrian fatalities reported. So I guess that's like good for the bikes, but pedestrians need to be prioritized. And also we should increase the mandatory sidewalks like by schools to more than 1/4 mile.
I just want to make a couple comments. Number one, I do see biking becoming more viable around the city. I ride my bike to school every single day, and I didn't used to. Most of the reason I started is because it became very difficult to park around my job, and also because the infrastructure improved. And so I think that once I realized that it was easy to, it was just the path of least resistance, and it was easier for me to ride my bike because it was laid out for me. So I started doing it, and I think that that is kind of the direction we should be heading. Is that kind of if you lay out the net, people are going to leap, so to speak. And so I think that's true with a lot of different things, but it's certainly true with bike infrastructure and just the popularity and craze of e-bikes right now, I think is something that should be captured and harnessed. And I think it's a really good way to get people out of their cars. And it's just better for people overall, I think. And I also think that the people in the city, they accommodate bikes. Like there's this one stretch at Laurel and California, where there is no bike lane, like going down California right there. And I know my students are driving behind me. And like, if they really wanted to, like, you know, they could. And they haven't. So I think that, you know, the city does kind of make room for pedestrian activity, bicycle activity, things like that. And, you know, people accommodate it. So I think that's a really good thing. On the sidewalk issue, I totally agree. Like, I recently did a remodel and, you know, we had to pour some sidewalk, but it was really frustrating for me because, you know, Public Works made a big deal about pouring the sidewalk and, you know, having it be this width and so on and so forth. And it literally was a sidewalk to the end of my property. And then it just stops, right? And so I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I might need a little history lesson here, but it seems to me that the city probably had private property owners doing the sidewalk just because it's prohibitively expensive for the city to take it on, right? And maintain, is that what it is? Okay, so I want to see more of that too, because I live in a neighborhood that's very walkable, very bikeable, and I just love being outside and doing it and not being in my car. So I think the more we can move towards that, the better. And frankly, the more that large development projects can pay for that type of infrastructure, I think the better. I don't think we're going to price out, you know, developers of 50, 100 unit buildings because of bicycle infrastructure. So just my opinion. I think we should set a hard line there and say, if you want to come and build here, that you need to contribute towards, you know, multimodal approaches. I think that's it. That's just my opinion. So, thank you.
Any other commissioners? Go ahead.
Contribute to public safety, I love it. Two quick thoughts. I was at Mary Ann's Day, which was like super busy. I've never seen we're out of these flavors before. Have you noticed that? With the kids, and there was a huge line, and I ran into my friend Brooke, and she's from Chicago. So she has that urban perspective of like, you idiots in this little, no, she doesn't say it like this, but you know, this little town, you guys, what the hell's wrong with you all? She wrote an op-ed about this with some very pointed criticism of the city. But I just thought how much I love what she was saying, and also felt like we're not a big city yet. And I do want to go fast, but like we're a long way from a lot of these things. And so let's just keep that in mind. As much as I love it and I want it all to happen, you know, it's a step-by-step thing. And again, I want to say, like, protecting those neighborhoods with traffic calming, not expensive, easy, you know. Basically, it's more or less done in a lot of parts of the west side. But just to balance my enthusiasm for going fast, we just need to take care of everyone who's here now, too. And then I'll end on a really fun one. I was leaving Mary Ann's, took the kids across the rail trail to cross safely, and it was like 2 kids on e-bikes, 2 guys on big mountain bikes coming the other way, me and the kids. It was all alternative transportation. I think there's a pedestrian involved, and you know, you're kind of like trying to make eye contact with everybody, and we all like looked at each other. We almost had a bike pedestrian crash with no cars. How amazing. So it's working. The reason I'm totally down to like go with 100% pedestrian is because we've made such progress in the bike stuff. It's not perfect, but we have come a long way. So I'll finish with that thought. But what a great accident that would have been.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Does anyone on the commission, on the panel here, have any concerns about increasing conflicts between pedestrians and electric bicycles?
I'm happy to start. I do a lot of work in the area of e-bikes, and I think what we go with, we went to the Netherlands and studied with the Dutch Cycling Embassy a couple years ago now, and the statement they have is mix where possible, separate where necessary. And some of the elements of separate have to do with speed, have to do with volume, have to do with weight. That's one of the reasons that we have been working to build out our separated bike network and continue to do that. Really look into the widths of the facilities that we put in to make them as wide as possible. In our mixed environments, we are going to have additional signage going up with the tagline is Cruz kind. So what we call social norming to reinforce that, and then doing a ton of education and encouragement in our schools and starting to launch this spring, next month, a middle school e-bike parking permit that will require in-classroom and on-bike training prior to be getting a parking permit sticker to be able to park your e-bike on campus. So what I would say is, I think we're having a huge uptick in the number of users. We have not seen the collision pattern that would cause me a level of concern. More, I think what we see is behaviors that we find unacceptable, that we want to address, but it hasn't played out in serious injuries or fatalities or reported collisions. So I think it's working. And I hope we continue on that trajectory.
Question.
Yes.
An application.
I'm going to second what Claire said, just because, you know, we see the Mission Hill kids driving by Santa Cruz High, and there's like 5 kids on one e-bike. You know, they're both like one hanging off the side, and there's like 3 lined up, and they're on their phones, and there's just so much going on. It's so scary, right? But same, like, I've never seen anything terrible happen, at least not yet. So, you know, that there.
I've seen them fall, but they usually get back up.
I've said it before. I went to Santa Cruz from 1990 to 94, and we did stupid things on skateboards and our dad's cars, and, you know, so we're never going to cure stupid kids, unfortunately.
All right, any
I
other
love
further-
seeing kids outside on bikes, socializing together in person.
Makes it hard to use your phone, which is a good thing.
Unfortunately not.
I did see today, no hands on the handlebars. You know, such balance, incredible.
I'm waiting to see the helmet that has the phone holder on it. The Google glasses.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, any other further comments? All right, thank you, staff.
Can I make one comment?
Oh, yeah.
I have loved just having a discussion. I wouldn't even mind having the public here, but I love this ability to just exchange ideas. Thank you very much.
Much appreciated to you as well for all your time. This was great feedback. I look forward to trying to fold it into some public policy recommendations.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for all your hard work, your forward thinking on all of this, and honestly, your overall dedication to our community. All right, so I guess now we open to public hearing. But seeing no one, I will go ahead and close public hearing, and then I guess we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, staff. We're on informational items. Does anyone in the commission have any informational items they would like to report on?
It's real quick. I went on an amazing tour of Kresge College building under construction up at UCSC. Man, they do some amazing stuff up there. It's ungodly expensive, but this building has a big sheet of plywood as the floor. So because of that, they reduce a ton of embodied energy. They were also literally able to cram a 3rd story into Charles Moore's amazingly beautiful 2-story building, which I was like, the green building is helping get more. It was just a wonderful moment. I wanted to share that. It could go on and on. It's just amazing. And the panels were shipped from Austria, because that's the latest they could get them. They have a 1/2-inch tolerance. Anyway, it was really cool. So go up to UCSA, check out their awesome buildings, and let's do that stuff down here more.
Did you have a comment, Lee?
I was going to provide updates on the calendar, but I'll also note that UCSC is the only place in the city using CLT cross-laminated timber right now. And so as that technology gets greater use, then I think there'll be more applications here, and very well could end up being used for taller buildings, right? It is being used for taller buildings right now. We've got that kind of that cap at 85 feet because of the construction types. But CLT can be used to go above 85 feet. And as there's more experience with it, I anticipate our downtown shifting to taller buildings as a result of that.
Awesome. I want to share that the very first planning commission I attended was the Educator Housing Project. and they broke ground yesterday. So that was really exciting to attend, and I'm glad Lee and Commissioner Kennedy were there to experience it.
Yep, we're excited to see that project progressing. The quick calendar updates.
All right,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
let's move on to calendar.
Let's see, the upcoming council meeting, we have a number of things. There is a three-part item related to prior direction from the council coming up this Tuesday. It's related to the downtown density bonus and whether that can be used in other areas of the city. The objective standards design toolkit direction, we've got recommendations related to that. And then some potential options for updating our tree removal process. There's not a formal action. We're not presenting ordinances or anything. This is more of a discussion and which direction do you want us to go? And of course, many of those involve policy and or ordinance updates. And so we'll be coordinating with you on those in the coming months, depending on the direction that we get from council. But I would anticipate your involvement, and that report is now available online. We also have our annual GP progress report, and that includes our housing element progress report. Just a sneak preview of that, we are doing really, really well at producing very low income and low income housing units so far. And we are not doing so well at producing moderate income or market rate housing units at this point. So we're well behind in market rate and moderate income, and we're very much ahead of the pace and in very low and low income. We will be presenting that to you all as an information item, but if you want to take a look at it, it's online at this point. Let's see, for the Planning Commission upcoming items, the April 2nd meeting is Passover, so we will not be having a meeting during that time. So no meeting on April 2nd. We do plan on having a meeting on the 16th of April where we'll be talking about local preference. Again, this is a follow-up to council direction related to local preference in affordable housing. And then likely the next meeting on May 7th, we'll be looking at ordinance updates as it relates to oil and gas drilling and mining offshore. And so strengthening our regulations as they relate to that. And then no definitive date yet, but the 201 Front Street project will be coming in that rough timeline as well. And that's all the updates that I have at this point. But if you have any questions.
Yeah, quick question just about the housing production. Is a good chunk of the low and very low, I guess it would be low. How much of that is ADU and versus, say, multifamily?
Good question. We have some percentage of the ADU production is going to low and moderate and also above moderate. And we're producing between 80 and 100 of those per year.
Still.
The reason why we're doing so well, predominantly the reason why we're doing so well in the very low and low income is one, city-led projects. So we've got a number of those between the Library Affordable Housing Project and Pack Station North, both counted towards this, this cycle. And that trend is going to continue. Just this week, we issued building permits for the Outdoor World project, which is 50 more 100% affordable units. While that's not a city-led project, we loaned them money to acquire that site. And so we're doing a lot to facilitate these developments. We also had last year 831 Water, not a city-led project, but our nonprofit development partners are doing a great job at going out and getting grants, just as our city team is. And we're actually seeing, a number of projects converting from market rate to 100% affordable because the interest rates and the construction costs and so forth really aren't making most projects pencil. So 130 Center Street, right across from Depot Park, 220 units or so. Those are SRO units, single room occupancy units. That, yes, the Calypso, yes. So that shifted from market rate to 100% affordable, and we're anticipating a building permit coming in for that in the near future.
That's incredible.
And it's not just that. I mean, Felker Street that looked at, that was market rate, shifted to 100% affordable. The Hageman site also looking at shifting to 100% affordable at SoCal and Hageman, the May Sushi. That's great that we're able to get those units because they are the most needed, those very low and low income units, and we need housing at all income levels. And there's some promising trends as relates to that. For example, the 530 Ocean Street project, 235 units or so submitted building permits. And that's the first market rate project that we've seen submit building permits, the large one, in several years.
House project?
Yes.
Well, and there's the housing bill coming down from Congress. That could be a big game changer. Well,
Not to mention the big bond. Yeah. That's so amazing. We might have too much affordable housing in this town.
Not too much. We still need a lot more.
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Lee, is there an estimate, is there any impact on property tax revenue to the county of these 100% affordable projects, or is the assessment what it is no matter what the demographic is?
There are implications. There are limits on property taxes for 100% affordable. I've asked that question before. I can't recall exactly what it is off the top of my head, but it is limited.
So that's something else we have to keep in mind.
All right, thanks, Lee. I'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting. Thank you.